Hello, welcome to a brief introduction on how to plan an essay. I'm Mrs. Burrow and I'm going to talk to you about this for a little while. The essay that I'm going to plan is focused on Othello and it's a debate question. However, this is a method you could use with any question at all. It doesn't have to be a debate question, it could be an extract question. The first piece of advice I'm going to give you is that the planning process is key to writing a successful essay, as it crystallises your thinking and results in a considered and well thought through essay. What's more, it's a really easy skill to learn, and if you practice this, you'll become very adept and very quick at doing this. So let's get going. Some key information for you. To plan well, you need to know your text very, very well. Until you know your text, the process is still possible, and a really good way of getting to know your text as well, but it will be a slow process initially. This is because the first step that you take when planning is to generate ideas. So initially you're going to be skimming through the text, looking for the ideas that you have in response to the question. It could be a really good idea to start the process collaborating. Work with someone to bounce ideas backwards and forwards and to spend some time talking about the question and the text, so you end up with lots of other people's ideas as well. But once you've done that, you need to branch out on your own. So the question I'm going to use to model the process today is: Othello is a misguided murderer rather than a cruel one. To what extent do you agree with this view? Straight away you can see this is a debate question, and there are three key areas to think about: whether he's cruel, misguided, and whether he's a murderer. I'm thinking that being a murderer doesn't seem to be up for debate. Othello does kill Desdemona, but what I'm thinking is this a crime of passion, or was it premeditated cruelty? So that's what I'm going to look at today. The first step is write down everything you can think of on a large piece of paper. Don't filter. Don't decide whether your idea is good or relevant at this stage. Just write it down. If this was an extract question, this stage would be annotating the extract. You annotate for everything. You don't think, is that relevant to the question at this point? You annotate and then you decide what's relevant. And it's the same with your ideas. You put all of your ideas down and then decide whether they're relevant or not. You should be thinking about the genre at this point. In this case, it's tragedy. Key moments in the text and the methods the writer's using. So use those things to hone your thinking about the question. So here we have my initial thoughts on the question. You can see from this that I begin with my gut response and why. He's a murderer, and it is premeditated. He spends a lot of time in the play talking about this and thinking about this. I think the chopper into messes is a really interesting quotation. It's the first thing he says when Iago proves that she's been unfaithful, falsely proves she's been unfaithful, and he says he's going to chop her into messes. That seems cruel to me. And you can see that I've worked through this, just putting down anything that pops into my head. Not necessarily thinking about whether it's cruel, whether it's misguided, just what's going on there. This bit's about tragedy, his moment of realisation, his flaw, that he's absolutely easy to convince. And then there's the role of Iago in all of this. Finally, I move on to the notion of, and I'm thinking about the notion of tragedy as I do this. Nothing is rejected at this point. Everything's just put down on paper, or in this case, on PowerPoint. So absolutely nothing is rejected. But looking at it, I'm not sure that I've got enough there. That's my first 3 minutes worth of it. So I'm going to think a little bit more about this. And what I've come up with is, I think, explicitly about theoretical perspective. So I've got a bit about a feminist. A feminist surely would see him as cruel. That's what a feminist response would this to this play would be, that he is powerful, in control, and he uses that in a very negative way. However, if I was doing a post-colonial reading of this, I would actually, that would bring a completely different perspective to my response, in that he's a victim here, he's the outsider, he's the one who's suffering at this moment. And finally, I thought about the setting. What's significant about the setting in this case, and how does that tie in with the question? So, there we go. I think I've got enough to work with here. Lots and lots of ideas. And now begins the process of refining them. Okay. So initially I've highlighted anything that would suggest that I agree with that. He's a cruel murderer. That's what he is. However, there's not that many of them. So actually I think I'm coming to the conclusion that perhaps I agree with this statement more than I disagree with it. He is a misguided murderer. There is some evidence that he's cruel, but not a huge amount of it. So I've refined this down to what extent I agree with this. And it's a great deal. I do agree with that statement. He is misguided rather than cruel. But it's not completely and totally that he's misguided. So I'm agreeing with this to a large extent. And this is my considered response. I think he's presented as misguided rather than cruel. I don't agree very much with the fact that he's cruel. Whilst it's possible to judge Othello harshly for the murder of Desdemona, Shakespeare seems to present him as a tragic hero who has been manipulated into killing his wife by Iago, and this is society he finds himself in. There appears to be a difference between the Othello the audience meet in Venice and the one they watch in Cyprus. So I'm clear about what it is I'm going to argue here. Absolutely clear. And now I need to go back to my initial thoughts and decide which of those are going to be useful to build this debate, to build my argument. So, whittling down your ideas. You know what you're arguing, and you're choosing the most powerful and convincing points to support this now. I've crossed out anything that I think I don't want to be main points. They may be used in support, they may reappear in the essay eventually, but currently they're not going to be the main driving point in the essay. They're not part of the structure of my debate. So I've whittled it down to not very many, really. I've left in the ones that I think are against this as well, because you need to include your counter-argument. So I haven't got rid of everything that doesn't agree with my belief, just how I'm going to structure my debate. Then you need to sort them into a cohesive argument. So you've got all of your ideas, you've got your key ideas here. This is what I'm going to use to argue and to convince the examiner about what I'm doing. And I've just colour-coded them currently. Yellow for the statement and blue against it. And they now need to be ordered. So yellow suggests that he's misguided, blue suggests that he's cruel, and I need to put them into some sort of order. If this was a paper plan, I'd just simply number them so that I know where I'm starting and what builds logically, okay? Here you go. And the impact of setting I'm going to have in my introduction. So this is them in some sort of order. So this is my agree in yellow and disagree in blue. Like I say, the impact of setting is going to go in the introduction. And then I'm going to talk about his manipulation by Iago and that he's misguided as he believes in the villain. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about Othello as a victim. So that's going to be my first key point, is that he's a victim. He believes in the words of Iago, and this makes him misguided. And then my counter-argument to that is, however, a feminist reading would actually see him as cruel, and he punishes Desdemona for an unproved transgression. He doesn't really get enough proof there to be convincing. And he also talks about him being cuckolded and how shameful this is for him. So that's where that one would go. Then I go on to him being a soldier killing people. And then the counter-argument, although his initial violent reaction to a supposed infidelity does seem cruel, because what he says initially is, I'm going to chop her into messes. He's very easily dissuaded from this. And then last bit, he does murder Desdemona, but he spends a huge amount of time working up to this in the play. He doesn't go quickly with that one. And this one, the 3A, is that he even says in the play that he thinks he's cruel. I that am cruel am yet merciful, I would not have thee lingering pain. So he confesses he's cruel, but the audience, I think, isn't entirely convinced by it. Perhaps they are at that very moment, but not really. And finally, that moment where he realises that he was wrong and how misguided he has been. So once you've got this lovely cohesive argument, the next thing you need to do is add quotations, methods, ideas about tragedy, key moments in the play. And once you've done this, you're ready to write. So I've added bits in here, you can see them in block capitals. There'd be lots more in here. If I was doing this on paper, there'd be all sorts of quotations, key quotations that I was going to use to support every point. I've got little bits of that, but actually I'd have even more if this was written on paper. I'm really interested in this setting, and is Othello's moment of chaos has come again when he loves Desdemona not. And it's all about that. In Venice, it's a really ordered society, and in that moment he's very kind to Desdemona and has respect for her. However, once he gets to Cyprus, chaos is come again. He's cruel, he hits Desdemona, he humiliates her in public before he kills her. So you build this argument, and this is adding more and more detail to your plan. And once you've added all of this detail, really you're ready to write. Okay, absolutely ready to write. And all you need to do is turn each point, your key ideas, into coherent prose. Embed your quotations and use discourse markers to guide your reader through your ideas and debate. You can watch presentations on YouTube to find out how to be successful at these things. So once you've got your plan going, your plan sorted out and detailed, you can move over and start thinking about how you put that together. But once you've done that successfully, it really will be straightforward to write your essay. You just turn each of those ideas into coherent prose, embedding quotations, and you're done. You don't have to think very much once you've planned successfully, because your argument is clear in your head and you know where you're going, you know where your essay is going. I'd say this process will work with any essay you're asked to write, whether it's in the exams, your NEA, an extract question, essays you're asked to write in lessons. It really doesn't matter, whatever you're doing. This planning process will help you get your head around what the question is asking you and what your response is to that question. And that's what's really, really important. Once you know your text really well, it should take you about 5 to 10 minutes to plan successfully and to come up with something as detailed as this. But as I've said, you need to know your text well before you can do that. So the key to planning successfully: know your text inside out so that it's really easy and all of your knowledge is at your fingertips, so you're focused on what your argument's going to be. Splurge your ideas, don't filter, but refine after you've got them all out there. Don't filter as you do it, just get all of your ideas down on paper, and then you can refine them and think, that's a good idea, I'm going to go with that one. This is the most convincing thing, I'm going to use that. So I'd like to finish with a thank you. Keep practicing, because this will become second nature to you if you do. And the more you practice this skill, the better you're going to become at it. Thank you.